video response to Bella, Rick, whatever. Serious video this time, I suppose, mostly. Yeah, we'll see. I seriously can't get the camera to stay where I just put it. Seriously. Anyway, so two kind of subjects. The first one, well, no, it's really the same subject. How do you practically deal with being alive? Okay, and so we have these two big problems. Your personal blah, like make it tolerable, sufferable, to live your stupid life out and try to make the most of it and all that kind of stuff. And, you know, I would say you're really obligated to be productive in some way. But that mostly has to do with fixing the problem, and the problem isn't you, the problem is the world. So the world has ISIS in it. That's one problem, is that, you know, we're never going to be able to fix anything even democratically, because all of these annoying forces are going to keep attacking the conversation, breaking down the capacity to pay attention to the things that really matter, because we're going to be too distracted trying to kill each other. Yeah, and you know, then, like I said, then you have the bigger picture of you know, creating this thing called civilization, and realizing that the future, basically, if you understand, if you've done any thinking or imagining about the future, and the combination of technology. I made a lot of videos a few years ago on this subject, you know, this idea of convergence of technology and our nature, and how those two things aren't mixing very well. That, you know, you're not going to solve problems in the future by crashing your star cruiser into the planet. I mean, we're not going to survive terrorism in the future. You're going to have a controlled society. You're going to have mechanisms that prevent people from having the power to throw the game on the floor. You know, you're playing a game, Risk, and they decide to just knock it over because they're losing. You can't let people do that anymore in the future. I mean, you have to nail the game board down. You have to nail them to their chair. You have to tie their arms or something. And that's just a practical fact. That's the world that is survivable. Everything else won't be survivable. If humans are allowed to cheat in the future, you won't have civilization. It'll be just totally, it'll be eaten away like termites or something. The structure can't exist. It won't exist. And will be reverted to, the cockroaches will win. You know, I'm just saying that I don't think there's any way to unravel that as a truth. So there's a goal, there's a destination that has to be accomplished, and accomplished from where we are now. So it just seems like there has to be some sort of solution created, mechanisms created, that still allow us to have some perception, some feeling of self-empowerment and control over our individual lives, and yet create enough structure where some religious kook, you know, can't tell us how to live and how to die, I guess, more specifically, for their God, kind of a thing. Likewise, you can't be, you know, stealing people's stuff and all that kind of crap and creating the problem in the first place. But that's more of a, you know, it's hard. You know, look, I don't like what America's done militarily, but obviously they don't create the shitty circumstances that exist in the world. And you know, the excuse for us to go in is provided by other people's bad behavior. You know, how bad we are once we're in, well, that's a whole nother subject. But that's where this has to all kind of get open and fixable. So anyway, Bella just had me thinking about the Star Trek solution, but she was always big on the Star Trek you know, what a wonderful little way to live. Totally impractical and has nothing to do with reality, but yes, sure. But they never really had a problem for this either. Solution, right? They always had ambassadors and the same kind of bullshit. Like, sure, they're going to fix it. But in some stories, it was like a society had found a fix. They had some computer running the show, or they had, like one example was they had computer wars. They synthesized a way where yes, we can exercise our hate, our, you know, but we'll do it in this civilized way, where we'll volunteer to be victims. We'll say, well, instead of blowing kids' arms off, okay, if somebody has to die, I'll die. And, let's go somewhere and do our roll of the dice, and we'll decide who dies for the cause. And that would be a lot more grown up. If we're going to have to deal with the fact that we're going to um, play this terrorist game, this revenge game, this I will force through violence you to comply to my demands or whatever. And I'm not saying, like I said, our demands, frankly, I think our demands should be even more rigorous, in terms of obliging people to be more civilized. You don't brainwash your kids with silly fables and all that kind of stuff. You don't have too many of them in the first place, and that's what creates a lot of these problems in the first place. Is people just think they're entitled to reproduce, and they're not obligated to be able to support their children, and they create the existence of refugees and everything else, the need for somebody to rescue, and then they create the obligation for other people logically to resent that, because they understand how much that destroys what could be invested in if we didn't have to invest in this human management bullshit. Zookeeping. I mean, you could call the military zookeeping, right? A huge expense just because a few animals can't behave. And all the other animals are punished for it. But in perspective, World War II, 70, 50, let's say, million people killed unpleasantly. So, we're obviously not paying nearly as high a price, but it's the only war in town, so it makes the news anyway. So I mean, there's no, you can't really have these conversations because people just don't, they just don't get this big picture kind of thing. That, all these civilized countries have, to some respect or other, become secularized. They've become somewhat logical in the sense that they want to have law that's, liberal, that as little law as possible, some sort of rational plan for Social Security and health care and all this kind of stuff. And these are all, really good things. And that those things are threatened, by this idea that you're going to solve, you're going to pick up the byproducts of the rest of the world's dysfunction, and somehow you're going to absorb that, and it's not going to in some way degrade your progress. And I think it's just inevitable that it will, and so that's another liability of this whole thing, is the mess made by the warring is now just creating this huge liability of cleaning up all this slop of human refuse, and it's really not practically useful. It's a bunch of ignorance and really toxic philosophy. Not going to do your civilization any good. So, I mean, I'd argue to the people who are all for this immigration, why should I think it's a good idea when I basically know the little tiny bit of voting power I have for any progressive change in the world is now being diluted. I'm becoming my ideals become weaker and weaker the more of these refugees you import. Why should I think it's a good idea? I mean, I think it's the only hope for for the human race is civilization. And you're basically telling me that it's okay, I'll destroy a little bit of it, and it'll be just fine. When I think it's quite obvious that we can't afford to lose any of it. We're way behind where we should be. We're way behind where we need to be. We're a long way from where we have to be in this race against technology that's going to make it possible for you not to live a civilized life, because just a few people with a little bit of hate will knock the game board over. They'll make the zoo uninhabitable for one Tyrannosaurus, right? That's all you need. It's one Tyrannosaurus loose in the zoo and you're fucked. So anyway, the solution I think has got to be some sort of, we have to migrate to some sort of gimmicks, some sort of, try to get them to man up. Some percentage of us say, okay, we'll die, we'll be killed systematically. If you find any CIA agents in your country, if you, something or whatever it is, we make some sort of bargains and we put real balls on the table and say, this is what we're playing for. Now, are you willing to play? Are you willing to man up and do the same thing? So if somebody commits a terrorist act, your Ayatollah gets his fucking head cut off? I mean, do you people have the balls? I mean, I would like to vote for a president who would say, me first. You know what I'm saying? I mean, yeah, I'm not going to send a bunch of perfectly good 22-year-olds or 21-year-olds over there to get burned up and killed. Somebody has to die for this cause. I'll do it first. Or I'll do it with certainty. As soon as the body count hits a certain number, I go with them when my 4-year term is over. I don't retire. I don't work for IBM. I don't make $10,000 or $10 million speeches. I die with them. I mean, I wish humans had the character to elect leaders that had those kind of balls. But I think that's what it's going to take. It's going to take a man, John Wayne or something. Some kind of real man. It's going to have to show up. I mean, Schwarzenegger pretended to be one in California, but yeah, he just, fucking the maid. I mean, he didn't take the job seriously. So yeah, we need somebody without, a bunch of steroids in their nuts. We need somebody who's the real deal, who can demonstrate a passion for resolving the problem, for fixing it, and not just perpetuating some stupid game that nobody's going to win in the end. They're going to lose, we're going to lose, nobody's going to win. We're just going to be a joke, a silly, stupid joke. Oh, human beings, yeah, they rose up out of apedom, to die in a rock war. A rock war, get it? Haha! That's a joke I just made up. Anyway. So I'm saying that, yes, maybe people ought to have those kind of conversations, some sort of Star Trek kind of conversation about, well, maybe this would be better. I mean, I can't, Kirk and Spock broke the little war computer and thought they were doing these people a favor, but in a way, there was a certain, I mean, they kept the worst part of war, right? The worst part is losing your father, losing your brother. And they pretended like that wasn't still bad, and that somehow it all just had been sanitized because you killed people humanely. You didn't let them die over a period of weeks of injuries, and you didn't burn little children and all that kind of shit. So the fact that you made the death more humane was somehow a horrible thing. And I think it's still a horrible thing. People would still want to solve the problem of war if their family members are being eliminated by it. So they'd still have huge incentive. But you could take the stupidity out of it, and you could do the negotiating and all the other stuff, because you wouldn't have the chaos of it. You wouldn't have the lopping off their head bullshit. You wouldn't have all the negative imagery that just fuels a lot of useless passion. And that maybe then you can have some sort of rational conversation about what kind of boundaries we're going to put around each other, and say that, look, okay, if you people really have to be lunatics and have to believe in a fairy tale, let's just understand that, we're going to put up fences, because we don't want Tyrannosauruses in our zoo. So if you want to go stomping around on your own people, well, I guess we'll let you do that, as long as your people are willing stompettes. But yeah, we're going to make sure first that your people are willingly getting stomped on, especially your women, and we're not going to like you. We're really going to think you're the most disgusting piles of shit, and you're insulting our intelligence, and we're not going to let you breed so prolifically that you start crawling over the fences and polluting us. That kind of, there'll have to be some sort of rules. If we're not going to be able to negotiate reality, so I'd almost say, let's just put it all on the table. Let's go all in. And in a sense, and just say, let's ask every human citizen, to slide their chips, to commit to one story or the other. There is a fable, there isn't a fable. Pick a fucking side. We're either going to be rational citizens of Earth, or we're going to be irrational fabulists. Slide your chips into a pile, and then winner take all. If you pick the wrong pile, you die. Humanely, but you die. Because really, there's no hope. I mean, there's certainly no hope. At least we have a 50% chance of rationality. I mean, if the dumbasses win, yeah, then it's, they're still going to lose in the end anyway, because they're too stupid. You're not going to run planet Earth on your fables. God isn't going to come save the day. Your ignorance and stupid overbreeding isn't going to solve a single problem. You're just going to rot in your own filth, you stupid pigs. I mean, intellectuals really have to recognize that, religion isn't just a silly or harmless idea. It's an invidiously stupid idea. It will ruin you as a human. It'll turn you into a piece of crap. You will not be a saint. Mother Teresa was no saint. She admitted it, okay? She admitted the whole thing was a fucking farce. Anyway. Alright, so I want to get to something else. So yeah, you're cut. So what are you allowed? How many rules of reason are you allowed to break just because you're human? Well, I'd say you're allowed to break all of them, actually. You really can. I suppose, as long as you're voting the right way. I mean, because it's really not about you, ideologically. I mean, as long as you're not having kids, of course, and as long as you're not financing other people having kids, or facilitating people getting pregnant or something, or doing anything to aid and, and make their, whatever, their procreation bed. Yeah, as long as you're not making any procreation beds, and you're at least trying to throw some thistles in there or something to fuck it up a little bit. I'd argue that it really just doesn't matter, because you're not, your power to do something is incredibly limited. And the to-do that has to be done is that we have to create a big enough mob where our mob can negotiate gameplay, where we can sit at the table and say all or nothing too. We can say, no, we're playing for it all, okay? So fuck you. You assholes can not concede that we now have enough power to make it impossible. But by our definition, once we have enough power, we win, because there won't be any for you to pick. There won't be any pieces for you to pick up anyway, one way or the other. So you can either do it gracefully or you can do it hard. But those would be the two choices once we have a big enough mob. Yeah. I think can get people to understand once they're in a no-win situation that it's time to concede. But anyway, but yeah, that's really the game, right? The game is changing the bad people's behavior. You can't, I mean, you just can't win by saying, I'll be good and I'll sacrifice and I'll be miserable in my sacrifice, and that somehow is going to save all the animals. It won't. So, again, I'm not defending being a total hypocrite, but some level of hypocrite for your human comfort is probably okay. I guess part of me, I guess, also would argue that, you know, some of that just has to come with the depth of your understanding. Because I guess I would argue I have no desire. You know, it's like eating meat. Once you stop for a while, you don't even, you know, make you throw up if you eat it. I mean, it just doesn't. You know, it's not very tempting at all. And I guess I would argue that it's sort of like that with pet ownership for me, right? I mean, I understand that for some people this is seductive because it's a companion, and they don't like being alone, and they like to have something to talk to, so it doesn't make them seem crazy because they're talking to themselves. But I guess I don't have really any of those problems because I can just, you know, I can just make a video, and whether I'm talking to myself or somebody else, it doesn't really matter. You know, I get it out of my system in one way or another. And I think to myself, and that's good enough for me anyway. Yeah, so I mean, I don't have any, it's all, the dark, you know, I don't, the darkness, the idea isn't just a philosophical concept, I guess is what I'm saying, is it's also a psychological concept in the sense I can't enjoy seeing puppies and kitties and all that stuff, because to me, I see when it goes wrong. I've seen when it goes wrong. I've seen what happens, and that vision placed on top of it is just, it just makes it impossible to say this is fun. This is, you know, to enjoy it with any kind of sincerity. You know, you can laugh for a minute and then the thoughts run through your head and it's just not funny. It's not, the joke isn't funny anymore, and it's just doesn't work. So I guess that's all I'm saying is it just doesn't. I don't have a real strong compulsion to, you know, no, I would never buy, even buy, yeah, I like cats, sort of. I like them better than dogs. Let's say I dislike them less than I dislike dogs. But, you know, in spirit, I like all of the little animals, you know, even Tyrannosauruses, in terms of I don't want them to be sad or unhappy or uncomfortable. So I don't dislike them in any kind of hard way where, you know, there's people who, they're so bad, they're so awful, they're so foul that, yeah, I really just couldn't. I couldn't bubble up any empathy for them if they were just tortured. Just fucking split down the middle tortured. If they had to eat their own fucking intestines or something, I could only say, well, that's exactly what they deserve, the motherfuckers. I mean, they were just too fucking stupid. There's no way they could be as stupid as they were pretending to be, so they could only be motherfucking evil. I mean, obnoxiously disrespectful to suffering. So that's what they deserve. I mean, you can't there's only one sacred thing in this universe, and that is suffering. That's it. That's the only sacred thing. Period. Everything else is bullshit. Torture, suffering, that's the sacred thing. You insult that. That's the highest and the only crime. Really. But anyway, that's a sidetrack of... But I'm just saying that's how you personally have to live. And then you can think better than that. You can think above that. But I'm just saying that these are the feelings you have to live with. And I'm just saying that I don't have a lot of capacity to enjoy the company of other living things. Because they just remind me of doom. Yeah. The horror. There's no way to peel it off with their. I see the lizard, or whatever, however you want to, you can't fool me with clown makeup anymore. I see the William Gacy behind it. So I guess that's enough of a video. Yeah. So, this is the kind of thing people really should think about, is strategies to create a mechanism that you could sell to Islam, where they thought it was a fair fight and a fair game, where they get their fair chance to convert us. We get our fair chance to convert them. Play a fair fight, and we recognize that we really just can't live with each other. So we either create two worlds to live in, where we never interact, or somebody's got to win, somebody's got to lose over time. Period. This is just not compatible. Religious faith is not compatible with rational problem solving. It just isn't. Anyway, so I think that's enough of a video now. Now it's enough. Yeah. So anyway, till next time. And the such.